Thank you very much indeed, Presiding Officer. Why should we celebrate St Andrew's Day? Some reasons are historical, some cultural, some are even political, some are humorous, and some are personal. Let me just start by extending our knowledge of where this flag is. It's actually a flag in the international signal flags. It stands for the letter M, and it means doctor on board, which of course fits very neatly with our tradition of training doctors around the world. We've heard of countries that have St Andrew as their patron saint. St Andrew is also the patron saint of Patras in Greece, Amalfi in Italy, Lucca in Malta, and Esgueira in Portugal. He was also the patron saint of Prussia and of the Order of the Golden Fleece. Andrew is also the patron saint of the United States Army Rangers. He certainly gets about a bit, and indeed the Church of Scotland has many St Andrew's kirks around the world, and I think that shows the reach of St Andrew. Mark Griffin very nicely and properly mentioned my constituents who founded Brewdog. I have to say that brewery, very successful as it is, run by two young lads of Mark Griffith's age rather than people of my age. The favourite beer from there is one which I can just about make relevant to this debate, is Trashy Blonde, which is a very nice blonde beer. And that leads me to perhaps one of the reasons why it's a little unwise for the Tories to choose this debate in the way that they do. Because if we want to celebrate St Andrew's Day for party political reasons, I've a better starting point than any of the others. Because the 30th of November 1990 was the day a removal van arrived at number 10 Downing Street to remove Maggie Thatcher from that address. So perhaps the Tories will be celebrating that as well. Others, of course, may have celebrated when I left the Bank of Scotland on the 30th of November 1999. So goose for the gander as well. By moving from banking to politics, I, of course, sought to improve my reputation. Many of us here, too, will have seen, if we've done any genealogical research, that many of our ancestors used the St Andrew's Cross to make their mark on certificates before the days of being literate. The Order of St Andrew in Russia is the highest order of merit in modern Russia. It's a very ancient order that was suspended during the time of the Soviet Union. I do note that the second highest order in Russia is the Order of St George. So we've got things right in that country at least. Recipients of the Order of St Andrew in Russia have been Peter the Great, Mikhail Gorbachev, and, less encouragingly, Mikhail Kalashnikov. The name Andrew itself is of interest. It comes from the Greek and it means manly, brave, manhood, valour, a whole series of attributes that I think we can all accept are ones that we should be proud of. Now, the Scots, if we're anything, is not just about 800,000 Scots who live in England. It's about 40 million Scots who live around the world. The majority of the living relatives that I have, of whom I'm aware, live outside Scotland, mostly in the United States, but also in Sweden, in Denmark, in South Africa, Australia, New Zealand and Hong Kong. And I will.
Margaret MacDonald.
I wonder if the member could say if he feels any further away and distant and separate from his family members because they're in different states from himself, because certainly my experience of having a daughter working in Ireland and a sister working in England was that I was just as close to both of them.
The member makes a good point, and of course the bounds of geography in the modern electronic world are much shrunk, and emotionally I feel no distance whatsoever. And of course my niece in Sweden and my nephew in Denmark are Scandinavians, just as after independence we will continue to be Britons. but by geography rather than by political choice. It's interesting, too, that if we look at what we have achieved jointly with our friends south of the border. I'm approximately 1/4 English myself, so have a number of great-grandparents from south of the border. We have achieved a great deal together, and I think that is to our shared credit. We have fought and won 2 world wars, but of course there were many independent countries joined the alliance voluntarily. We didn't have to be bound in a political union to do that. Presiding Officer, there are lots of local events in lots of different constituencies. We'll celebrate in our own individual way. In my constituency, in Fraserburgh, we will have Travellers' Tales in Fraserburgh Library tomorrow. We'll have great reads for winter nights in Peterhead 2 days later. And on the 1st, we'll have Meet the Author, Shona MacLean in Banff Castle. And that's going to be absolutely excellent contributions to understanding all around the world. It's worth looking at what we have on our own doorstep here. Robert Ferguson has a new statue standing outside the Canongate Kirk, the man that Burns described as elder brother in the Mews, and Adam Smith is in the kirkyard as well, someone whose works are carried by capitalists around the world and by communists as well, an immense contribution. When Dennis Canavan successfully brought forward his members' bill to create a holiday in Scotland, he worked closely within the powers of the Parliament. We can prescribe and create bank holidays. They are, in a technical sense, only days where banks may not charge interest. That's all a bank holiday actually is. And, of course, he was able to create holidays for civil servants. Would that he had been able, through that member's bill, to create holidays for wider Scotland. It has to be voluntary. It cannot be created by powers of this here. Burns suppers. Yes, I will.
Just for clarification, are you saying if the powers were available that the Scottish Government's position to create an extra holiday on this day?
I no longer, I have to say, do speak for the Scottish Government. I speak for myself when I say that. You'll need to ask others if that's what we want. Bringing my remarks to a close, the remains of St Andrew were taken to the ends of the earth, so no wonder that we who travel to the ends of the earth of Scott have adopted him as our saint.
Close, please.
And finally, Presiding Officer, I visited Hebron in the West Bank in the 1970s. 1,000 years later, freckled Arabs with red hair. The footprint of the Scots is everywhere. The footprint of St Andrew similarly.